Salutations, everyone, and welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide for the Immortal Empire's beta. I'm Lord Forwind, and here we are today doing a guide on Kislev. So there are 3 Kislev factions, and we will cover them each in turn. But to start, we are going to go over the faction, how they play, which is very different. Then we'll talk about their units and their economy, and their technology, and then finally we will go over start locations. And all of that should be chaptered below, so you can skip to what section you're interested in. So first off, Kislev is, I want to say it's a return to probably like Attila Total War, with playing as the Roman Empire, that are of course at that time collapsing. This is honestly one of the funner campaigns I've had in a while. You're going to be attacked by everybody from basically every direction, and it is going to be a struggle to survive. Now, what that means is there are 3 capital Kislev settlements: Erengrad, Prague, which is over here, and then Kislev's capital itself down here. Those are unique settlements to the Kislevites. They've got unique buildings in them. They're richer. They're single province cities. They are the heart and soul of Kislev. What this means is minor settlements, like these right up here, are trash. You're going to take them and you're going to lose them, probably quite a lot. What matters is defending your major cities. So in the case of Kostaltyn here, Erengrad is the heart and soul of your realm, and you never want to let it fall. In fact, ideally, you never wanted to let it get under siege. Of course, is a little harder said than done. This means, and I'm going to go a little out of order here. This means the first building you should build as either Kislev or Kostaltyn is a city watch patrol. This is the Kislevite garrison building. Interestingly enough, you can build it at level 1. Provides a little bit of control, but more importantly, it adds armored Kossars. And basically, you want to upgrade this every single level all the way to the top. It's not so much that it makes the garrison able to kill invading armies, but what it does is it discourages the AI from attacking it, and a fair amount of time it can actually kill invading armies. I won't lie. Anyway, you want to do that. These buildings are the ones you want to keep alive as much as you can. Interestingly enough, Kislev has this other one, which is walls. It reduces the attrition you take while under siege, which is nice. The problem is it doesn't reduce it so massively, but it is worth sticking on a city like Prague over here, which tends to get sieged a lot. Erengrad seems to be sieged less than even Kislev's capital, which is just really the winter court or whatever she's called over there, the ice court. So the other 3 mechanics to be aware of are the power struggle between Kostaltyn and the Tzarina. Basically, they are competing for the support of the people of Kislev, and it is a race to see who gets a 600 loyalists pretty early on. Don't worry about this too much. The AI is pretty bad about getting supporters at the moment. Honestly, even if you have a building that gives you 1 supporter a turn, you'll keep up with them. 2, you'll be ahead. 3, you'll be dominating. And you get those by building specific buildings. The minor settlements have 1, but a large settlement like Kislev, Prague, or Erengrad have basically you can build an Orthodox cathedral that gets you, as you'll see, devotion generated 1, supporters generated 1. These are usually, if you're playing as the Tzarina or Sultan, worth building once you level up your city to the next level. You want that garrison building first. Just rule of thumb, you want the garrison building. If you can, you want to upgrade your starting barracks, and you ideally want to get an income building going. So a cool thing for the Kislevites is they have this market trade district, which fully maxed out generates an insane amount of money. But ideally, you want to get it going at level 1 or level 2, and that should significantly boost the revenue of your city. And you want to keep those cities alive. They give you your money. Late game, they will be able to support an army and a half. So your strategy is to defend them at all costs. Now up here, you'll notice we have the supporters, but up here we have basically invocations. You can invoke the various Kislevite gods, and they have different effects. The biggest one you want to be aware of is Ursun here, because it causes attrition to enemy armies within your territory. This is amazingly powerful. What you want to use it for is, as I said, if you're going to put garrison buildings in your strong cities, they still will probably come under siege. But as soon as they get close to being under siege, if you throw on the invocation of Ursun, it will damage the siegers to such a point that usually after 2-3 turns of siege, you can attack from the city and you'll wipe them out because the attrition from this right is greater than you suffer for being under siege, usually. It's probably why this building here exists, which reduces the attrition you take while under siege. Combining those two, I would say Kislev is probably the most defensive civ in the game right now. Most defensive race or faction in the game. Now, the other ones are important because if you fulfill their goals for Ursun, if you occupy a settlement, you get 5 supporters. If you fight a battle, you get 2. If you construct a building, you get 1. This might be useful reasonably early on if you're building a lot of buildings in your capital. But I tend to, by and large, ignore these top 2, even though the growth is great. I'd rather have the defense, or if I'm going on offense, the additional melee attack and Wrath of the Bear ability. I find are more useful. So initially, for every faction, you're going to probably want to invoke the Ursun Rite immediately, because within the first 2-3 turns, that's what it looks like, you're going to want to take a couple settlements, and that will get you supporters. We'll talk about the difference for Boris Ursus during his section, because he deals with all that differently. Now, the other thing the Kislevites have is they have Ice Maidens, or Frost Maidens, and Ice Witches. These are not just simply hired from a building like other hero units are. They have to be trained first, which is cool because they enter the map with additional bonuses and stuff. At the start of the game, you can't do any of them. You have to unlock them through certain technologies. Ice Sculpting, Ice Court Indoctrination, Ice Court Discipline, and Ice Court Control will unlock various ones. Then you have to pay a set amount of money. I think it's like 1,400 to start the training. And then every turn or two, you will get an event that allows you to pick between 2 bonuses. It might increase infantry weapon strength by 5% in their army, or 10% discount in spells. They are very useful. Because Kislev is so defensive, you're going to level up your heroes and your lords to level 20 pretty fast, because you should be fighting battles most of the time. So early on, going and getting an unlock like Ice Court Discipline to get a Frost Maiden hero training slot could be very powerful. The Kislevite Magic, Tempest, and Ice, I won't say are my favorite, but getting one of those to level 20 is worth more than having a single unit, even high level, in your army. So you're going to have to focus a lot on your hero units. So I will point out these patriarchs are constructed from the religious tree building, the Orthodox religious tree buildings. They are a very powerful hero unit, and they deserve a mention at this point because it does drastically affect how you play the game as Kislev. First off, they cleanse corruption, which is great because you're going to be fighting a lot of chaos corruption. And then you get replenished troops, and you want to max this out as soon as you can. Your army should be healing. You're going to need your armies healed every like 2-3 turns at most. But the other thing is they have this Ursun's Roar ability, which then you can then customize further to restore vigor, to give additional melee attack, or my favorite, to heal the hit points of combatants in an area. This is really powerful. You get 3 uses of it, and it heals like 1% of health a second for 15 seconds almost. So In battle, this allows the Patriarchs to keep the Kislevite troops fighting much longer than they would otherwise. Meaning, if you have a Patriarch in your army is probably at least a quarter to a third better than otherwise. It's almost always worth having one of these in the armies. And later on, they're your melee unit. They will get some decent combat effect. Later on, they will buff everything in an area, which is great. And they get War Bears, which makes them extremely hard to kill. So they are a very good hero unit. That's why I mentioned them. The other mechanic here is the Atman mechanic. This is where you assign a lord, which you can deploy to the battlefield. I recommend you don't, to oversee your province. And once you own 2 provinces, it unlocks. You click on it, it will zoom out. It will allow you to pick an Atman. You'll usually have 3 choices, and then you can choose where to place it. Early on, and it's basically a rule, you only want to put it in settlements you can defend. So put it in your capital. If you're the Tzarina or Kostaltyn, stick it in Kislev or Eringrad's capital. And ideally, you want an Atman that gives growth, or income boost. Ideally, growth over income. The Kislevites have a very poor ability to grow their cities. In my opinion, there's better buildings than their growth building that you kind of need to build, which means anything that gives additional growth will get your major cities larger first, and then finally upgrade them to the highest level, get you better units and way more income. So let's wander quickly back up here to the porters. If either as the Tzarina or Kostaltyn, you manage to hit 600 loyalist supremacies, you confederate the other faction. And by the way, both Kislev factions tend to survive, in my opinion. They usually just hold on to their capital. But the nation that holds Prague over here tends to die eventually, which could lead you to rush in and be able to snag that city for yourself. If you can, it's great. Otherwise, their political opponent taking it, totally all right. You just don't want to leave it in the hands of chaos because it becomes a pain. So there are a couple minor Kislevite factions scattered around the map. They will die very quickly, so don't worry about them. Don't try and save them. They're pretty much doomed from the get-go. Okay, let's talk Kislevite units. So the Kislevite units are, in my opinion, very strong at certain things. First off, their base unit over here is Kossars, which are a hybrid range and melee unit. They're not the world's best infantry, but I would rank them near the top tier of the level 1 infantry in the game because they do decent range, they do decent melee strength, they're hard to rout, and they handle themselves fairly well in melee combat. The other thing is all the Kislevite units have I think all of them, or at least most of them, have an ability called By Our Blood. If their leadership is wavering, this will trigger, and it will make them unbreakable for 30 seconds. This means even if it looks like they should be routing and running from the battlefield, they will fight on longer than they should. Usually, if they're getting that low on leadership, after the unbreakableness goes away, they almost inevitably will rout or even shatter because they will have gained even more leadership penalties because they're probably losing the fight by the end of it. But this means Kislevites units are an absolute pain to wipe off the battlefield, and for you as a defender, even your base infantry holds out far longer than they should. It is almost impossible to do a cav charge into the rear of a Kislevite army and start a mass rout solely because of this passive. So if you're actually playing against Kislev, be aware of that. The other unit they get from the beginning is they get access to the Kostaltyn Dervishes, which are a semi-light cavalry unit. Hits hard, moves fast. I would not throw it into melee with almost anything except for archers and artillery. It will lose against other cav. Its stats are pretty good, but it seems to not do well in combat. Has very low armor, which is probably why. The next one, as soon as you build your barracks, you will get access to Kossars with spears. This, in my opinion, is just a general flat upgrade to the base Kossar unit. Spears are much more useful than axes in total fighting. Plus, they come with better melee defense if reduced melee attack. To be fair, most of your army is going to consist of units with range attacks, so additional melee defense is probably more useful than melee attack at this point. Then when you upgrade it, you finally get to starting to get into the better Kislevite units. You have access to the armored Kossars, which are a very powerful frontline unit. They are high armor, shielded, and they have a pistol, so they shoot at reasonable range. And they got good melee attack defense, and they will hold their own in melee combat. Plus, they're unbreakable by our blood, which makes them very hard to rout. These guys are great because usually you have gun units or you have melee units, and usually they're not the same, which means there's always a little bit of how do I set up my lines so that my range units can shoot while I can still fight with my melee units. This kind of solves the problem. These guys will tend to get off 1 or 2 volleys before enemies close with them. They have low ammunition. Honestly, I've never had them really run out of that much ammunition because usually they get charged into on the front lines. And it's great because once the enemy starts routing, if they have enemy ammunition, they will shoot them in the back and devastate the unit even further. A good unit, a group of these guys can even kill lords if you get a full volley off on them. And then you also have access to the armored Kossars, which arguably have spears and are arguably a better melee unit in the sense that they can counter cav and their armor piercing. But I find the armored Kossars with the shields to be worth usually more on the battlefield. You do need some ability to kill units, and that's what the normal armored Kossars provide. Even though the Kossars with great weapons do more melee attack, they die to range. So pick and choose what you want. Both are great units. And then finally, up at the top, you get a unit that should be a lot stronger than it is, in my opinion. You get the Streltsy, which is a Great Axe gun unit. The name comes from Russia. And these guys have guns that are armor penetrating and decent range. You're going to want 4 or 5 of them. You're going to want to set them up usually as a firing line. They're not as powerful, in my opinion, as like Empire or Dwarf handgunners, which tend to devastate units. These guys, I've never seen them devastate units. Usually they get like 40, 50 kills, which is worth it, bringing them to the battlefield. But it's not game changing. And in melee combat, they're decent. They will hold out against medium tier infantry, but nothing better. It's kind of honestly a disappointment for the finishing of the barracks line. Thankfully, that's made up by the Royal Barracks, the Tsar Barracks units. So you have the Tsar Guard, which is an armored shielded infantry unit. This unit is a tier 3. It is solid. It will fight on. It will kill a lot of things in melee combat. And the cool thing is sometimes you get them in garrisons. They can hold walls on their own. It's impressive. Then you get their other one, which is Tsar Guards with great weapons. No shield, instead more armor-piercing, anti-infantry unit. Overall, the Tsar Guard without the shield tends to be a better unit, in my opinion. By this point, you should have Streltsy in your army or even artillery, so the lack of a shield is not as devastating. Plus, most of the people you fight as Kislev in the normal campaign are Warriors of Chaos or Norska, neither of which are known for amazing ranged weapons. And then finally, at the top of the Tsar Barracks, you have the Griffin Legion, which is heavy shot cav. They're solid, they're good. I don't find them as amazing as, say, the Bretonnian or even Empire high-level knights, but they do their job. I believe they're 1 turn to train most places. I could be wrong. They're not outrageously expensive to build or maintain, so use them. They also very nicely give fear, which helps when fighting Norska and Chaos, and even Skaven. They're really good against Skaven. Trust me, we'll talk about it, but you're going to see lots of Skaven. Over here, you have your stables. You get Cossite dervishes, which you also had access to over here, which means it's a little bit strange. I think this only applies for minor settlements. I'd have to go in and look at it. I don't want to do it right now. The next level is an upgraded one. You get horse archers. These are a little bit better. You can theoretically make a fast cav army as these guys. The problem is They're not amazing. These are great skirmishers. If you throw on the battlefield, they'll just run away and shoot. The problem is, I find their missile strength is not strong enough for them to actually kill things. Anything that can keep up with them will kill them. um, but against slow-moving armies, they have their place to pepper it. And then you have winged lancers, which are a shot cav, not as good as your Griffin legions, but you get it a level of building further, and you can build it in minor settlements. And it's decent. Its melee attack and defense are low, though, if you look at it. It's not much better than the Kostaltyn dervishes. The only difference is it's got armor and shields, and it does here. I think it needs a bit of a buff. That's my opinion. We'll see what they end up doing. Then you also have access to the ice training grounds, where you get access to the ice guards. The ice guards are kind of like a weird hybrid magic unit. They use magic and ice when they attack. They have frostbite, which slows enemies hit by them. It's quite cool because they have it on their range weapons. So if you hit an enemy with these range weapons, it slows the enemy, giving you more time to shoot it. They're a really good unit. Good melee attack, good missile strength, decent melee defense. They're pretty cool to use. And they resist spells. Also nice. And then up above that, you get the Covenant of Ice, where you get ice guards with glaives. In general, just a flat upgrade from the dual swords, in my opinion. Slightly less melee attack, but they become armor piercing, and they are anti-large, which means they're invaluable at killing monsters. Bring one or two of these. The only reason I don't recommend more than one or two in an army is because they're a level 5 unit. So by the time you get to them, you probably don't need them because you're already winning or otherwise. Plus, you're only going to be able to build them at a handful of settlements anyway. So think of it what you will. Just don't rely on these because you won't have a ton of them in your army. And then over here, we have access to the elemental animals. We start with the snow leopard. The snow leopard stats look great. It's not that great of a unit. It's okay. Don't get me wrong. In fact, some of your ice maidens have the abilities to summon these to the battlefield, where they become much more useful because they're free an additional unit. They are anti-large, so they're pretty decent at killing other monster units. They move very fast, actually. They have 100 movement speed. They're going to outmove a lot of stuff. They do terror. They do not have much armor. They will not stand up in melee combat versus even really basic infantry, but they're great at targeting lords, monsters, or even cav they can catch up to. Then above that, you have access to the War Bear Riders, because the Kislevites apparently know how to ride grizzlies or other bears. Armor-piercing anti-large cav, always a good thing, tends to do great fighting other cav or monsters. The only downside is their low unit number within each regiment. Bring one or two of them. They're fairly solid at what they do. They are, in general, I think, a flat upgrade to any of the Kislevite cav units. The only one, the Griffin Legion, might still be better, but they're definitely better than the Wing Lancers, in my opinion. They have significantly better stats at fighting, and they hit harder, which is always a nice thing. And then finally, you have the Elemental Bear. If you want an iconic Kislevite unit, this is it. It is a giant, unbreakable bear wreathed in lightning and ice. It hits hard. It's very hard to kill. It's a siege one. It has a ranged weapon. So long as you have units around it so it doesn't get soloed, it is going to be very powerful. Now, the reason you don't want it on its own, unlike other monstrous units, it has extraordinarily high leadership, plus it's unbreakable. So its morale isn't the problem. The problem is it's a single entity unit. So it can only attack a handful of units in front of it, whereas the units on all sides of it will also attack. It is a great unit to have on your front line, fighting amongst Zargards and stuff. And it will prove its worth more there than if you try and solo regiments with it. That's my experience with it. Other people might have had a different one. And then you have their, it's not really artillery, it's like war machines building. Which first off boosts the income and local recruitment. So you're going to want to get this reasonably early on to help you make more money and get more units on the field. But your first one is you get war sleds. War sleds are surprisingly faster than most cav. They have decent charge and melee defense, which means you can send them into backlines to get routes. But they also have very good range and a missile attack. The downside is they only have 4 entities, and cav still tends to beat them in combat. Once you get them, it's worth bringing 1 or 2 to the battle. They prove their worth. They're great at flanking. The collision attack thing is really nice. They can do some substantial damage in a charge. Plus, they fear the enemy. Up above, you've got the smithery, and this is where you get your only artillery unit, the Little Grom. It's a late artillery unit, honestly, but it is solid. It's got a huge range, good missile damage, good missile strength, and it can actually fight someone in melee combat. And if for some reason somebody moves into it, it has a collision attack. It's overall pretty good. It's an armored artillery thing. You're going to want one of these in every army just so that you can launch siege battles immediately. The other options are like your elemental bears provide that as well. But otherwise, you have very limited army options to attack settlements without a siege. This solves that problem. I've never seen it go a battle without getting like 80 to 90 kills, which makes it totally worth it. And you also have heavy war sleds, which are pretty much just a flat upgrade from your war sled, although more expensive. Once you get it, I don't know why you'd really ever want to build the light war sleds except for money problems. It's significantly better. And I already talked about briefly about the Patriarch unit, so we won't talk about that any further. Okay, let's talk about the economy for the Kislevites. And I've already talked a little bit about how your major settlements are your source of everything. So in the case of Kostaltyn, Erengrad is the center of your empire, and for a long time it'll be the only safe and money-making part of your empire. Just the nature of Kislev play, your minor settlements, it's almost not even worth upgrading them because they will be taken and wiped out so often. It's worth owning them for the little bit of income they have and the fact they distract enemies, but it's not worth upgrading them until, if you can take one, don't invest in it until you get to level 3 and can put a garrison with walls in it. Prior to that, it's just free pickings for any AI that comes along. So don't think about the economy in your minor settlements. They have an edict that boosts income by 5%. Throw it down. Forget about the provinces. Don't even build barracks in them. Level 1 walls, your base walls, don't bother. You need the upgraded ones. They're pretty much just purely trash settlements. The only thing you might build in them are buildings that either increase replenishment or give you supporters or purge corruption. All your economy is associated with your capital. In this case, Erengrad. I already talked about it, how you get the market stalls. This is your big source of income in your capital. The toolmaker is strong because it boosts it by 10%, which over time can add up. They give a good, decent amount of income just from the base. In the case of Erengrad, you have a harbor that's worth upgrading. You don't have the same thing in the Ice Court capital, which frees you up to either do other stuff. Kislevites do have a growth building here, these Hallow Keepers Guild, which some people are going to say you should build. And yes, it will allow you to get to the higher levels faster. You do not want to build it on the first level because you want to get a garrison, and you definitely need to get a better barracks going, if anything else. And if you're playing as Kostaltyn or the Tzarina, you really should build an Orthodox Oblette, or whatever the Ice Court calls it, just so that you get devotion, supporters, control, and corruption. Funny thing is, Kislev doesn't have to deal too much with control and corruption in their capitals. It just happens that way. But the best investment is definitely the market stalls in this. If you have a resource building, these are important because certain ones, as you'll see, this one upgrades market income by 3%. Of course, you're only going to have a handful of markets around the map. This is a good boost. Other resources improve farms, which is a basic income building for the fights. You know what? Actually, let me show you this. Just ignore what I'm doing. This is not what you do for this start. So if we were to look at this, you'll see they have markets, which cost 1,000 and give you 100. It's a terrible investment. It takes 10 turns. It's not worth doing. They have a Orthodox Shrine, which is worth it if you've got the spare resources. Be aware that all your religious buildings cost devotion, and devotion has one other great purpose we didn't talk about, which I will mention here briefly. If you've got low amounts of it, chaos can appear, just pop up in your land. If you have high amounts of it, chaos will not appear. Plus, you spend it on these invocations, so getting a source of it, it's almost like another currency. Over here, you've got a control growth building. I wouldn't build this unless you need to build up a region, and more importantly, can you defend it while you're building it up? This is an interesting one here. This hollowed wood is worth mentioning because fully upgraded, it increases the income from your farms in the local region. Plus, it gives devotion, casualty, increase ambush. Overall, it's a great building. Kostaltyn has a penalty towards building these at some point. So just be aware that this is much more Tzarina or Boris Ursus. Here is arguably one of the strangest buildings in the game. I think the number needs to be altered. It costs 500 build. It gives you 50 income. Yes, it gives you growth and reduced recruitment cost. It's still a terrible building. Stuff like the hallowed wood, even upgraded, plus 50, fully upgraded, it's going to give you 150 income. So it's a 10-turn repay back period. True, you can boost it with resource buildings. It's not very profitable. The market is worth more to build. It's easier to build, doesn't require as many building slots used up. Still don't build this in a minor settlement so you can get fully upgraded walls. It's not worth it. And the other source of income for Kislev, first off, is trade. You've got a fair amount of resources in your lands. Erengrad, Kislev, they start with resources. Usually you'll end up getting your hands on some of the neighboring settlements here that have more resources. So trade can become a good source of it. You, by and large, are going to be at peace with the Empire. So long as the Empire survives, you can trade with them. Later on, Cathay and the High Elves will want to trade with you as well. But the vast majority of income for the Kislevites comes from combat. You're going to be fighting constantly. If you can't hold a settlement, like the next turn, raise it to the ground or loot it. By and large, when you win a battle, you have an option to increase devotion, replenish your troops, ransom, or kill them. Usually, you either want the devotion if your devotion's low. Otherwise, you heal if you're going to keep fighting. Otherwise, ransom them. It's going to be your biggest source of income. You're going to ramp up some massive war chests because you won't have things to upgrade in your capital because you won't have any minor settlements, and your capital takes time to get the growth needed to get to highest levels. So the economy of Kislevite is surprisingly combat-oriented rather than building-oriented. Okay, let's talk about the technology. So the technology of Kislev is unique in the sense that you have 4 different trees. One that's unlocked at the start. It requires 2 technologies in the higher group to unlock the next group, and 2 here to unlock this one. This is the weakest tree of all of them. You're still going to want to go down it. It has its purpose, but it's the other 3 trees that matter. They're labeled Kislev, Erengrad, or Prague. Or Prague in this case, because it doesn't have a U-E at the end. It's basically Prague, let's be honest. And these are unique because in order to unlock the lower technology group, you have to own the city. So in order to unlock the lower Kislevite ones, you need 5 technologies from above, and then you need to own Kislev. So Kostaltyn can immediately do the Erengrad. Tzarina can immediately do Kislev. Prague, you need to get, and poor Boris Ursus, who's lurking up in the north of Chaos Ways, can unlock any of them until he fights his way south and then confederates or reconquers Kislev. Now, what technologies to take first? Question that people always ask me for guides. So we'll start about cold storage. Cold storage gives casualty replenishment and growth rate. You want growth rate and you want it early. It's where you're going to get it. Get that growth rate, immediately then go for convalescence, which gives you more casualty replenishment and more growth. Combined, that's 15 growth and 5 replenishment. It's almost equivalent to a building and having a hero in your army that gives replenishment. After that, you have a few options. If you want to go the strategy of getting immortal heroes or generals, by all means go down to Ice Court Indoctrination, Ice Court Discipline, or even Ice Sculpting and just get those started. Uh, by and large, you don't need the Ice Witch generals. You can just have them heroes. The Boyar generals, I think, are a better unit. They're a very strong melee one. We can talk about those briefly um, later on, but they're very powerful. Afterwards, I do recommend grabbing Hooked Axe blades after you've done Cold Storage and Convalescence. Plus 4 melee defense to your Kossars and Streltsy just makes their already half decent melee stats even better. Since you're going to be fighting a lot, anything that boosts your stats early on is pretty good. You don't really need to go leather treatment because your horse archers and dervishes should never be attacked. Afterwards, you've got several options. I recommend you take Pirate's Weapons, which gives increased range and armor piercing. This helps with fighting Chaos, which has a lot of armor. Plus, the additional range and reload time allow units to shoot more and fire more. And since basically every mid to low level Kislevite unit has a ranged weapon, this is just a general buff for all of them. Afterwards, if you're fighting a lot of the Norse, which you will be, it can be worth taking a detour down here into Norse Hatred, which need lens crafters first. This just gives a buff to all your units when fighting Norse Chaos and Demons, which by and large you're going to be fighting. Combined with I Hooked Axe Blades, that's an additional 8 melee defense for your Kossars. So that would put them around 34, 35. It's pretty powerful. Then they become a lot more defensive. Afterwards, you've got a couple other options. I tend to recommend Improved Lookouts because it gives recruitment capacity. Since it's a tech, you can get it in 4 turns rather than having to build a building. This way, if you lose an army, you can rebuild a stronger one at your major capital settlement before it becomes under siege, or raise an army to go rescue your capital in a minor settlement. Afterwards, if you're going to use Streltsy, it is worth grabbing the Streltsy Arsenal. An additional 10% armor damage is huge on a unit that should already be stronger than it is. And then you can finish it off with Prague Veterans, which makes your units immune to psychology while fighting against Warriors of Chaos and Demons. This basically means your units no longer will be affected by terror, or fear, or any of those effects that make your units run away or have lower leadership. It's great. After that, you've got a host of other options. I would recommend going for Prague Remembers. +2 corruption reduction in all your provinces is equivalent to a level 2 Orthodox building. Since you're going to be fighting factions that have corruption, additional corruption reduction is always a good thing. You'll get Call to Prayer, which makes your Patriarchs cheaper, and Glacial Prism. They're almost forgettable. Afterwards, you've got other options. If you're going to use Little Grom, the additional range is great. You probably won't have Little Groms yet, but by building that, it gets you down here to the Harbor Cartel, where you get tradable resources. And if you're Kostaltyn, you can continue further down. If so, as Kostaltyn, I would recommend getting improved harbor defenses, additional 500 defensive supplies per turn while under siege. Siege lasts 2 turns, then they attack. That's another mid-level tower you can build. Even if they attack after like 1 turn, you'll get an additional tower on the battlefield. This is amazingly powerful and makes Kislev even more defensive. Then also for Stalton, probably Harbor Watch, Port Merchants Guild, Erengrad Code, and honestly even Fortify the Land if you're going to use Elemental Bears, all good. For the Tzarina, rather than going all the way down here to Harbor Cartel and Grom's Telemetry, it'd be worth snagging the Tsar Guards because she gets a discount to them. Iron River Stone isn't bad. Can be quite useful. If you're having trouble recruiting units, getting capital barracks renovations is worth it. It will make recruiting units 5% cheaper. And the improved relations with the Empire is nice. You don't need it, but it will make the entire Empire want to be allies, trade with you, and be nice. So it can be worth snagging. Afterwards, you can pick what you want. I recommend getting either the Kislevin Ducat for an additional 20 from your settlement buildings, or Imperial Efficiency for all income from all buildings by 5. I honestly would probably take Imperial Efficiency, then the Kislevin Ducat. You're going to want to research both, run right after another. It's a huge boost of your income. After that, you can kind of pick whatever you want. If you're fighting anything with range, this is a good one. Otherwise, it's probably worth getting bear baiting if you're going to use war bear, aggressive cultivation if you're using elemental bear, and orthodox interdiction if for some reason you're needing to use global recruitment. I've done a full 2 campaigns of these guys in preparation for this, and I never used global recruitment capacity, honestly, just because of the cost. And usually you're fighting within 1 turn of your large settlements anyway. Over here, we'll just go over this quickly. If you're going to build Hallowed Woods and you're not Kostaltyn, this is worth snagging. Kostaltyn has a 200% increased construction cost penalty at some point that you're going to have to take. It's worth having. Ursinite Cult Customs. If you can get this early on, it boosts your invocation of the Motherland and increases the melee defense of your army, again strengthening the Kislevite defensive mentality. Troll Company Pathfinder is worth over Toughened Sanctions or Stanchions. Additional movement range, always good. Further down here, you have different options. I recommend Breach Loaders and armor missile damage +3 for Kossars and Streltsy. Great boost to their combat ability, and it allows them to shred chaos. Plus reload time is great as well. And then probably Devotional Creed, which is just a flat reduction to plagues. So if you're fighting any of the Nurgle factions or Skaven that keep causing plagues in your land, great. Plus you get additional devotion from fighting chaos. Generating devotion is somewhat difficult, so it's quite useful to have a bonus to that. Okay, let's talk lords and starting locations, starting with Kostaltyn. We're here already. So Kostaltyn starts in Erengrad, which is the richest of the 3 major Kislevite cities. It's harbor. I do recommend first thing you do, build the city watch for the defensive garrison, and then probably upgrade the harbor. And that's probably all you're going to be able to do. The other option is if you want better units better, do the barracks. Really up to you. Fight this first battle here. You're fighting other Kislevites. If you micro it, you might come out of it strong enough to take the settlement. If you auto-resolve, you will not. If you auto-resolve, retreat back deeper in. Well, you're already in your lands. Don't go into their lands. If you can, go into the encampment stand, recruit 2 units. The next turn, attack Castle Alexandrinov, and you should be able to take it. In the meantime, don't forget Erengrad can do an edict immediately. I recommend you probably do relief columns for the recruitment cost and recruitment capacity. Later on, you're going to want to put it on Awaken the Land. Kostaltyn may need it on Purge the Steppes just because he doesn't have the huge public order bonus Tzarina has. And this one is only good if you're having corruptions or plagues. The reality is you're never going to have corruptions in your major settlements. It's almost impossible to overcome just the default Kislevite corruption reductions from their buildings. And the rest of it, if you're going to recruit heroes, but you're not going to recruit massive amounts of heroes. So after you've taken Alexandrinov, don't build anything in it. Build 2 more units. Then the next turn, march to over here. You should be able to build 4 units in Erengrad, build those up, and take Brzozhensk. After you've taken that, you're going to basically abandon those northern settlements. You're not going to build anything in them. And I want to repeat this. You are not going to build anything in them. Okay? There is a reason for this, and that is they are going to get sacked and captured and fought over probably quite a bit unless you play an amazing game. So therefore, building anything there is a waste of time. The reason we even captured them in the first place is that will unlock an Atman, which you immediately want to stick in Erengrad. Growth, then income, then public order, then corruption reduction. Those are your priority order. You want the growth and you want the income. Any decision you make, you should either do recruitment bonuses, income, or growth, or even research. Don't worry about heroes or anything else. They're not a problem. After you've taken Shank, you want to build up again if you've lost units. And now you've got a couple options. This province here will be taken next turn by the Ecstatic Legion, which is a Warriors of Chaos faction. They will attack you pretty early on. Over here, you have the Skaven. Get the name in the Hell Pit, whatever. They will quickly take this area. So you've got a couple options. You're going to be at war with the Skavens and Warriors of Chaos early on, no matter what you do. If you attack the Skaven early, you can delay their spamming like 4 stacks. They will have 2 to 3 stacks running around the map constantly, if not 3 to 4. So by taking these two, you can cause havoc and make money. If so, march into Stragkov. They probably will have taken it. Take it back from them. Heal up and sit outside of it in an ambush stance. If you're lucky, you kill Throck or Throg or whatever his name is. Will increase your lords, at which point you can take Osterok. You're not going to be able to defend these 4 settlements. Probably by that time, the Ecstatic Legion will have wiped out the Brotherhood of the Bear and sailed south and taken Castle Alexandrinov. Tried it 3-4 times. They almost always will attack you. You cannot stop them unless you have your army there. If you have your army there, they won't come after you. Instead, the Skaven will come after you from this side. Your goal, should you choose to try and accomplish it, is to take the Tower of Krok. It's very hard to do. You're going to need to replace your Kossars with armored Kossars, either Zargards. You're going to need stronger than your starting Kossars because it is they have a very good garrison, and don't even try to take it if they have an army in it. If you see an army there, wait at minimum 2 turns for that army to get out of range, then move in. You can sit in an ambush stance right here. Somehow the AI knows you're there because they will defend. It becomes very difficult to get up there. You'll need 1 turn to march to up to here, 2 to start the siege, and 3 to win. If they have any army nearby, they will race back to defend it. If you take Tower of Krok and you do it quickly, the Ecstatic Legion will probably only own Bay of Blades. If you can, and I have accomplished this twice in prepping for this, you want to race over there. It's gonna take you 2 to 3 turns to march there. So if you force march to here, then the next turn you'll be able to attack. Now, the problem is they tend to leave their army sitting in Bay of Blades. You can lure it out, and I will explain how to do this. And this is a totally different strategy you will need to learn for Kislev. And I'll mention this again with the Tzarina. I didn't put it in concepts because it's a little weird. The AI is obsessed with upgrading settlements or building buildings like garrisons. I cannot over articulate it. It needs to be fixed. It probably will be. If it isn't, this is a great strategy. If you need to get enemies to come to your settlements, or you want to get them to move out, start an upgrading settlement. So if you want to lure the army out of Bay of Blades, take the Tower of Krok and then start upgrading Castle Alexandrinov. The AI very stupidly tends to leave Bay of Blades, sail over, and take Alexandrinov. But because it is not in the Kislevite area, they either it's not in the Norska area, they cannot capture it as a building for themselves. At best, they can give it to their vassal. So if you take Bay of Blades, they tend to have just 1 province here, and then you can sail in. They can't really recruit units from it. You can usually win that battle and wipe out the Ecstatic Legion. That is your goal for the first 30 turns, 30 to 40 turns, is to kill off the Ecstatic Legion. At which point, Chaos will keep attacking you here, but because Tower of Krok is a capital settlement, you can at least put a decent garrison building in it, and it should stop any real invasions from this area here. The Norska aren't as good as the Ecstatic Legion about invading overseas, at which point, if you move your army back to this Zhoyshenk area, you can probably risk upgrading Alexandrinov and Zhoyshenk to level 3, put either farms and woods in them, or in the case since you're Kostaltyn, marketplaces, garrisons, and churches. And that will, once you get the level 3 walls, the AI doesn't tend to attack them. So you'll at least make half a decent amount of money. You'll be getting good supporters. There will be no corruption, and you'll have good devotion. At which point, once Erengrad hits the next level, which should be pretty soon, you do want to throw down a Orthodox district if you can. If you want to build more combat units, getting the Tsar barracks early on can be pretty powerful. There are 3 other unique buildings in Erengrad. The big one is the Linsk Bridge, which gives plus 20 income from buildings. combining that with the harbor and the marketplace, you can generate some insane amounts of money as Kostaltyn early on. The other ones here are, I find, a little bit less than useful. Frostholm is a late game building. Temple of Man, only if you're going to be fighting Norska at seas, but why would you really want to? I don't tend to build these two unless till towards the end of the game. They're also super expensive to build. If you can, get to level 4, Capital of Erengrad, and get little Grom unit, because that will help in your next objective. Your next objective is to take Hill Pit from the Skaven. Now, the Tzarina seems to do better than Kostaltyn as an AI. She tends to expand up and she will retake these settlements from the Skaven. However, she and Kostaltyn, if you play as her, seems to struggle to take Hell Pit. Hell Pit is a very powerful settlement, and the AI, because they're Skaven, can use the Underway to retreat back there very quickly. What you need to do, march up and ambush, wait till it's empty, and then attack using Little Grom or an Elemental Bear to siege attack, take the settlement instantly, and occupy it. It is a capital settlement, so you can put a strong garrison in it. And that, if you can manage to do that, the only real vulnerability you have is up through here. If you're lucky, the dwarves survive. You'll probably end up allying or trading with them. You can march up there, seize that, leave an army there, and by and large, northern Kislev will be secured for Kostaltyn, at which point he can push towards Prague, and then hopefully confederate the Tzarina, or even push north or west into Norska even further. And sorry, this was a long explanation. Let's look at Kostaltyn himself. Kostaltyn, standard blue line. You want Logician, you want Quartermaster, you want Renowned and Feared. If you're going to need to fight multiple armies at the same time, Lightning Strike is great. Be wary of the Skaven because they can ambush you. So Alert is not a bad one either. You should basically only move around outside of cities in ambush stance if you can help it. It's very easy to get wiped out by 2-3 stacks rushing over to fight you. And the AI will coordinate. The Skaven will work with the Norska and Warriors of Chaos. It's a pain. He has access to Salik's Lullaby, just like the Patriarchs. He is one. It's worth getting for him. If you have a Patriarch in an army that's 6 healing casts at a minimum, it's really powerful. He'll unlock for the people, which gives a wonderful casualty replenishment boost. Kostaltyn can heal like 50% of his army's health every turn. It's great. Strongman, if he dies, this allows him to heal from his wounds faster and more hit points. Sadly, he's not the world's best melee combatant, but he does have the ability to give flaming attacks to his nearby armies. Also, additional devotion from heroes. Okay. This just makes his army more offensive. Oh, the Pious. And it wants you to have Patriarchs and use them. Plus, the 2 devotion a turn is quite really useful early on. Weapon strength makes him more combat oriented. He'll never be the world's best fighter, but he can become pretty solid. And then Firebrand, reduce recruitment and local recruit capacity up. Very powerful. Orthodoxy in action, you're going to get and want to take at level 20. Be aware that it makes the Hallowed Wood building that I was talking about. It's kind of the other non-orthodoxy religious thing. Makes it prohibitively expensive to build, but it does make orthodoxy buildings cheap, and it gives you 10% income faction-wide, which is why you want to take something with a penalty. He gets a War Bear, which makes it hard to kill. Arcane Vassal, if you've ever wanted to cast spells as an insane priest, here you go. At which point, you probably want to do Blue Line. Then I recommend probably getting his For the People and Salik's Lullaby. Then you could go down the red line. I recommend firing drills at start if you've got extra points to spend. This boosts your Kossar's Streltsy. And armored Kossars, Best of the Court is good. It makes your Zarguard and Ice Guard super hard to kill in melee. And then at that point, you can kind of customize whatever you want. It is worth going fully up the tree here to get standard ground at some point, usually around level 30 to 40. Kislev units level up really fast fighting chaos because you're constantly fighting, so it's very easy to get to the later ones, which require level 7. And at that point, if you want, you can strengthen him in combat. If so, get the melee defense first. He has one quest here, which is to get the Burning Brazier, which will give him a mace, which makes him do more damage, lower health he has, and corruption and melee attack. It's not such an amazing weapon. You have to go for it super early. It's also difficult to go for it super early because it's going to use your army, even though it's right here, the objective. It will weaken your army, and the AI is super aggressive and may pounce while your army is weak on your outlying settlements. Anyway, Kostaltyn's passive, sorry, I should point that out, wound recovery time faster, and his entire army gets frenzies or melee attack. He is the melee lord of the Kislevites. And that is Kostaltyn. Focus on Erengrad, expand, keep raiding, keep retaking, try kill the Ecstatic Legion and then the Skaven, and then kind of go wherever you want. Difficult, you're going to be attacked. Expect like 20 war declarations in the first 40 turns. It's ridiculous. Good luck. Oh, I should have mentioned this. If you use your heroes, your patriarch hero, to do an action, assault, or something else, you get devotion. Can be a good source of devotion. They also have a ward save, and your Khazars have additional leadership and melee attack. Okay, here we are as the Tzarina, the ice court of Kislev. So we're at turn 133, and the reason I've loaded this in is to show you how far I have actually expanded in 133 turns. It's not far. As you can see, we're at war with a lot of people, and our lands are very scattered. Kislev has stood very strong, and it's the only one you start with. So let's go over starting moves. So you will start here. There'll be an enemy army here. You can fight the battle. If you auto-resolve, you will not be able to auto-resolve the settlement battle, but it's a very short retreat into your lands, build up troops, next turn, take Zavastra. Afterwards, build up more troops, march down to take Vitivio and Fort Jakova as well. You're going to want to switch Kislev early on to additional recruitment so that you march back through there and you can recruit your units faster. Of course, you want to throw down a garrison in Kislev and the marketplace and upgrade the barracks so you get good units. You're going to want to try and make friends with whoever you can. Despite being further south and behind Prague, I found the Tzarina has a much harder campaign than Kostaltyn, which is hilarious. Considering you should not have a harder campaign, but you do. About that. The first thing to realize is that there's a green skin faction here. Get the name of it, but they will attack you. If you upgrade Fort Jakova, Vitivia, or Zavastra, almost inevitably they will declare war on you. At the same time, the Skaven from Hell Pit up here, I wanted to point that out, tend to come after you as well. If you upgrade Zavastra or Vitivia, they will literally run all the way down here to sack the settlement. It's the most egregious example of player bias I've seen in a while. I actually had Grimgor Ironhide march all the way over from his start, all the way over here to sack Zavastra and then leave because I was upgrading it. I cannot overemphasize how hard it is to defend small outlying settlements as fights. Kislev needs to be your focus. If you can, the next prize is Bischhofen over here. Which tends to get taken by the greenskins or even vampires or even the Wargrove of Woe at some point. If you can recapture it, it is a capital settlement, so you can put a good garrison build in it. It will be hard to take, not as hard to take as Kislev is for the enemies, but will cement this area's safety a little bit more. Don't build any of these until you can afford to leave an army there for the 15 plus turns it takes to upgrade. The Kislevite upgrade rate on buildings is like 5 turns. It is horrifically bad. I can't show you here. And then you have to build the first wall and then the second wall. Then you can defend it. Now, at some point you're gonna have to kick the greenskin guy out of your land, and you want to try and kill him off if you can. He owns Karak Ungar, which, despite a gold mine, is not a great prize for Kislev. Kislev gets very little money from gold mines. Fully upgraded is only 400 gold a turn a gold mine, meaning gold mines aren't really worth too much for them. You still might need to take these provinces to wipe them out. If you wait long enough, the dwarves of Karak Kadrin will eventually march over and take it for you. If you expand down here to Eschen and Morheim, Be extraordinarily careful you don't start an upgrade without an army there. And even if you have an army there, the vampire counts will tend to invade you. Now, a trick I learned is once they sack a settlement, if you do not repair the buildings, they tend not to take the settlement. Sometimes they will, but I'd say like 95% of the time they leave the settlement alone under your control in ruins. That is the best outcome for you because you don't want to constantly be defending it, and you're going to make no money for it anyway. But by owning it, you prevent the corruption and the AI from encroaching on your borders. At some point, the Warriors of Chaos Plague guy sitting over here in Brass Keep tends to conquer Hergig and Krugenwall, and then will declare war on you. Again, if you upgrade to Vastra, VTO, or Fort Jakova, he tends to send an army over there, even through his enemy's lands, to sack your settlement. Kostaltyn up here is your political rival, but he tends to do a very good job of holding this area, and given time, he will eliminate the Ecstatic Legion and control this area, sometimes even taking Kelpit if you're lucky. Prague is your great prize to the north. At some point, Prague will fall. When Prague does, and ideally you should be defensive allies or allies with them so you can see it. If you are, throw a garrison building in Prague. Anything you can to prevent Prague from falling, you want to do. But if Prague falls, you need to take it quickly. If you march in and take Prague early on, it becomes, again, another massive settlement for Kislev, and your strength will almost double easily. Upgrade it, defend it, put both types of garrison buildings in it for sure, and then probably do the you're going to want to do the bleakness and upgrade that for the additional reduced attrition in all your armies, and maybe even Citadel of Prague for leadership under siege. If you're going to have a province capital that's going to get attacked a lot, it's probably Prague. This area here is the most siege-like border I have ever come across. It's super hard to take because you'll get invaded by 3 people trying to retake it. It's a pain. My advice is sit in Prague, sack, raise Volksgrad, and retreat until you can devote 2 or even 3 armies to subduing this area. As you can see, I had to devote 3 armies here, push them out. You're not going to be able to take it. As the Tzarina, until I had 3 armies and then 4, I never felt safe at any point. Kislev came under siege like 4 or 5 times. This was an absolute pain. I'm quite serious. You have to get it to level 3 with walls to have any hope of defending it. The TVO is probably the one you're going to get to level 3 first because it's in one distance marching range of both Bishofen and Kislev, meaning you can station or build an army here and then defend this whole area. Killing the greenskins early is your main goal if they're at war with you. If not, great. Try and prevent them from at war with you. Don't tempt them, though, by upgrading a settlement without an army in it. It's not worth the hassle. I got invaded by greenskins, the Warriors of Chaos Nurgle guy, and the vampires, all because I started upgrading Nagenhof without an army in it. It was a pain. You're going to probably have to expand into the Northern Empire to subdue it. Be aware that you want to try and hold the capital settlements. The minor ones are harder to hold without an army there to build them up. Norska will keep invading these guys here. This is Bellacor's army. They literally sailed all the way from his capital over there to sack and raise one of the settlements I was upgrading. Anti-player bias like crazy. Ideally, you got to take out Hell Pit early on if you can. That will make your life easier with a Skaven. It's hard to do if you're fighting greenskins and vampires as well. Afterwards, fighting your way over here to Karag Vlog, subduing these areas is key. If you get these and get garrisons in them, the Warriors of Chaos up here tend not to be very good about invading overseas. So Karag Vlog, Temple of Heimkill, and up here, Karak Drak tend to do a good job. If you devote 1 army to this area, you by and large can hold it once you conquer it and put walls. Now, let's talk about the Tzarina and her personal traits. So, her faction, if you use Frost Maidens, do hero actions, you'll generate devotion. I didn't do too much of this. In retrospect, I probably should have done more because I kept periodically getting little chaos invasions and the lack of being able to execute the invocations when I wanted. Um, but it wasn't a huge problem. She gets a +6 control, which is absolutely nuts in all her provinces. I never had any unrest rebellions in the full campaign, and it went on for almost twice the turn we're at now, if not more. She trains Frost Maidens faster, which is nice, but you're not going to be trading massive amounts of them until you're around a turn 132, which I'm at already. Um, but it's great. No public order problems. Good control. The Tzarina herself has some amazing abilities. Her Ice Queen purges corruption -6. You march her into a province, even if it's a stronghold of the enemy, and she's going to start purging the corruption. Especially if you take Fervent, that will be -9 corruption reduction, which is massive. In terms of starting with her, she has Ice Magic. I wouldn't over prioritize Ice Magic. It's going to be worth doing the blue line here, getting Fervent, probably Leader of Renown or Reassuring Presence if you're worried about casualties. Magician, Renowned and Feared, at least one level of Quartermaster, if not fully max it out. Cheap, powerful, well healing troops that are raised at a good level and you can recruit a lot of them is key to the defense of Kislev. Afterwards, you'll get access to Ice Mistress, increases the cooldown on Lore of Ice. If you want to spam your ice spells, now's the time to start getting them. The one you want is Con Queen. Con Queen gives an additional order, gets 2 devotion a turn, which helps a lot, and better relations with Kislev. At this point, the supporter race should be going, and you should be at level 1 or 2. So you already will have improved relations with Kostaltyn and Prague. If you get this one, you usually can get at least a non-aggression and trade pack with Kostaltyn, if not a defensive pact, at which point it's a lot safer to expand because then you know what he's doing. Shield of Ice, ward save for your entire army. I cannot talk about how great an ability this is. 8% ward save on any types of damage is just great. Um, it's great. Any type of damage reduced by 8 is amazing. Dominable Spirit. This incentivizes you to use Ice Guards, which you should. Embodiment of Winter makes her half decent at melee combat. She's never going to be strong because she doesn't have a yellow line associated with fighting, but she does have Ice Magic, so build that up as well. Up here, Guardian's Call is worth throwing points into at some point, at least one. If you can upgrade it to 3, a upgraded Snow Leopard, the ability to summon one in battle. Snow Leopards aren't great, but if you can summon one, it's a free unit that is strong or mediumly strong. The upgraded version's considerably stronger. You can summon it from a good distance behind enemies, intercept charging units. It's a versatile ability. Stock is not needed. Ursun's Protection, you're not going to have a lot of missile issues. So that is roughly how you can play her. She's got a couple quests. Gets Frostfang if she goes for this one. Gives her an active ability, magic attack, makes her slightly stronger in combat, and reduced upkeep. It's a good one. Don't go massively out of your way. It's not a game-changing one. Crystal Cloak is a nice one as well. If you can snag this, the additional ward save and ward save while casting means you'll be sitting at like 38 ward save, which is quite nice. And if she, for some reason, dies, the wound recovery is nice. You definitely want to get a Patriarch early on. As I have said before, getting one of those is amazingly useful. Trying to expand slowly, really, until you get Kislev generating this amount of money. And then Prague, you're never going to have the ability to expand much. You're going to be on the defensive. No matter what, Kislev must not fall. If you lose everything else, so long as you can keep Kislev and ideally a minor settlement alive, just one, you're going to be hard to kill. If you keep your army in the minor settlement, you can rush over to defend Kislev. If the minor settlement comes under siege, you can rush out from Kislev to defend it. The reason I say you want one other settlement other than your capital is if you lose a battle, your army gets wiped out, so you have no military. You cannot raise another army to lift the siege, and the odds of you managing to lift the siege without an army are slim. Your only hope is to do the invocation of Ursun. So having a minor settlement will allow you to train an army and send up troops as well. I cannot articulate how much the invocation of Ursun is key to stopping the enemy from overrunning you. Uh, it will absolutely devastate enemy armies marching through your lands if you use it properly. So expand south if you can. If you can wipe out the greenskins, this area is much safer. Be wary of the vampires. They don't tend to expand too far north, but I had them go all the way up to try and sack Beachhofen a couple times. Can kill the Skaven, kill them. The odds of you getting up there to kill them without the vampires or greenskins to invading is slim. You may have to invade the west here to wipe out the warriors of Chaos Nurgle faction over here. You're going to need 2 armies to do so. Be aware of that. Once you wipe them out, though, this area is now reasonably secure, except for enemies literally sending forces halfway across the map to prevent me from upgrading settlements. It's really annoying. And that's about it. After this, by this time, endgame will trigger, or you'll be ready to confederate your political rival. I am still not at this point in the game. That's because I did not focus getting supporters for quite some time. But you do that, you control all the lands of Kislev. You're going to be rich. You're going to be powerful. Just make sure that you do make sure there's a garrison in Erengrad, because the AI does not tend to build garrison buildings, in which case the last thing you want is to take the settlement in Confederation and then lose it to a randomly roaming army. And that is the Tzarina of Kislev. On to Boris Ursus. Okay, here we are as Boris Ursus. I am not actually sure if you need to unlock Boris Ursus in the main Souls Race campaign to get him here. I have a sneaking suspicion you do. If you don't, you'll be here. If you do, play a game as Kislev on the Souls Race, and you'll get the mission to unlock this faction. So you start down here, Tower of Torment. You want to take it. It is a minor settlement you're not going to be able to do too much with, so build a Hallowed Wood for the casualty replenishment. You will be at war with a faction of faction to your north up here. You're going to want to start invading Monolith, Burning Monolith, and then the Howling Citadel. Howling Citadel is the main prize because it is a capital settlement. Once you take it, you want to get a garrison at level 2 as fast as you can, and this will become the center of your power. Unlike the other 2 Kislevite factions, you don't have a unique Kislevite settlement anywhere in your lands. In fact, a very viable strategy might be to, from the Tower of Torment, march south to Frozen Landing or Sail, and then start trying to conquer this area here so that you're close and can maybe take Prague at some point, or confederate the others. Otherwise, Boris Ursus is kind of on his own up here. In fact, the AI Boris Ursus tends to get wiped out in the first 20-25 turns max. From what I've seen, he's hard to survive as because you don't have any of those unique, hard to take settlements. So once you've subdued your starting region, I recommend purge the steppes so that if the enemy does invade, they move slower. At which point, Archon the Everchosen will attack you probably from Riot Fortress, along with the Crystal Spire's All-Seeing Eye of Siege. This is where things get tricky. If you attack the Siege faction, Archeon will invade. If you attack Archeon, the Siegean faction will invade. My advice, if you can pull it off, is race over, sack or raise Crystal Spires. I wouldn't try and occupy it. If you occupy it, you will get attacked by the Warriors of Chaos over here. But by sacking or raising it, you will delay the All-Seeing Eye for a while, and the Warriors of Chaos, Legions of Chaos, will tend to pounce on them and kill them off. Once you get a defensive building here, even if you have to raise and put another unit in there to defend it, a Lord, Boyard Lord, for example, in which case you probably want a strategist or something. Something that gives you either combat or movement or corruption reductions. Build them up there, keep them alive, try and get something of an economy going. It's pretty painful. Thankfully, you get a large amount of devotion as this faction, so you have almost no chance of chaos incursions. You want to try and wipe out Archeon, the Everchosen's faction, as soon as you can. So after you've dealt with the All-Seeing Eyes, march over. He tends to leave his fortress vulnerable, and you can usually sneak towards it in ambush stance. The problem is he tends to invade down here with these Norska, who tend to hate you. You'll probably lose Monument of Festerling or Tower of Torment. a couple times. It's really frustrating. Burning Monolith seems less likely to attack. Plus, if you're attacking out here, you might be able to get it up to level 3 and get walls in it. I'm around turn 30, so around 35, this will be a defendable settlement at this point. Howling Citadel is going to be key, so you're going to want to get barracks going so you get better than Kossars. Because Kossars are great early on. Eventually, the Warriors of Chaos will outclass you. You need better units. Now, afterwards, you've got multiple routes of expansion. You'll probably be fighting the Norse here. I found they tended to want to make peace, in which case I would recommend you march this way and fight your way through as much of the Chaos race as possible. This will alleviate the pressure on Kislev and continue expanding your land that way. So something interesting about Boris Ursus is he does not settle Chaos Waste factions well. He has a penalty towards them. He gets devotion from owning them, but that's due to his faction stuff. So everything he owns in the Chaos Waste is more expensive and hard to maintain. Now, if you go south, for example, you'll get into mountains and frozen lands, which are better for you. However, Boris Ursus has a ability that semi-negates the Chaos Waste penalty. This would be even worse for a non-Boris Ursus Kislev faction. That was a long sentence. He is the High Priest of Ursun. He is also the father of the Tzarina, the former Tsar. He gets along well with her. If he owns settlements in Chaos Waste, they have reduced penalties, which we've seen, and they generate devotion. Garrison and religious buildings are cheaper for him to build, which is extremely nice because his income is very poor. But this allows you to actually build up settlements faster and defend them better, and he specializes in war bear riders. As an actual lord, Boris Ursus is a fairly good fighter. He will get a very powerful bear early on, making him hard to kill. Gets heroic resilience, which means him even harder to kill once he gets low health. If you look at it right now, he'd have 78 melee defense once he gets below 50% hit points, which is very powerful. One with Ursun, he weakens enemy leadership and buffs people around him. Weakens his own leadership. It's not a big thing. The most powerful ability might be in the entire Total Warhammer 3 game is this one, Resettler. Growth, all provinces, no colonization cost faction wide. You come across a ruin, most factions have to pay a good chunk of chains to rebuild it. He does not. This means he can freely go through and absolutely sack and raise settlements and then send a singular lord around colonizing them for free. It's great. He doesn't have to worry about it. Normally, you have to carry around a large army to decrease the colonization cost, so that then you lose half your army that needs to replenish, but you settle the settlement. This is not a thing for him. He can do it with a single lord. It's very useful. Outside of that, standard blue line, get Logician, get Renowned Feared, get Quartermaster. Even more pressing to upgrade Quartermaster and Renowned and Feared than the other Kislevite factions because your economy is terrible. I can hardly repeat that enough. Your economy sucks. The only way you're going to make money as this guy really is fighting. You'll get some once you fully upgrade your settlements, but due to the Chaos Waste penalties and stuff, you need a lot of money to build a defensive, functioning economy. It's painful. His unique tree, he gets additional hit points, and leadership kind of counterbalances the as one with Ursun. He becomes a fearless fighter and immune to psychology. This is not amazing because you can research a tech that does the same thing, but the bonus versus large means he's great at killing monstrous units. Brother of Bears makes war bears, elemental bears stronger. If you're noticing a theme of him with bears, good for you. He is the bear lord of the Kislevite factions. Band of Brutes makes his Tsar guards better, considering he was the ex-Tsar, and he has an ability called the Khan King, which gives him better relations with Kislev. This makes a lot of sense. The Great Reclaimer, additional movement range, and finally, regeneration for Elemental Bears. Elemental Bears is a level 5 settlement unit, but once you get it, it's amazingly powerful. This just makes them even stronger. He also becomes the Great Builder, where building stuff is faster and cheaper. Note the decreased construction time for garrisons, which stacks well with his decreased construction cost for garrisons. He's actually a very good lord to have sitting in your lands rather than being on the offensive, at least early on. 60% cheaper garrison buildings that build faster? Yes, please. It will help you get to that level 3 settlements with walls much faster. Outside of that, I do recommend inspiring presence before you build up his personal combat stats, mainly because his economy sucks. So, what units you do have, you have to make them as good as possible. And since you're not going to have secondary armies, it makes sense to buff the one you have rather than making an already good fighter even stronger. He's not the type of fighter who will solely win battles. He doesn't have the resistances for those. He is a red Tsar, so War Bear Riders units are cheaper. Again, going with the bears. His army is significantly stronger when fighting Wars of Chaos and other Norska units. He is immune to Chaos Wastes and Undivided Corruption. This means he can freely walk places. He doesn't have to go in the encampment stance or spend time healing from attrition. He can just simply march through it. His units are great at fighting chaos. The only problem is you're broke. You can overcome it, but you're pretty well broke. Outside of that, once you kill Archeon, which you should try and do as Boris, specifically, you'll get an additional bonus to fighting chaos. It goes very well with his other stats to make them stronger. Plus, it gives him more physical defense. Try to kill Archeon, the Ever-Chosen, with Boris. If you can't, it's not the biggest loss. It's just stronger on Boris. Outside of that, you're going to get a lot of bonuses towards fighting chaos. Corn, Troll, Construction. Constructor is a great trait on him because it means things build faster and he makes more money. Overall, you're less under siege than Kislev is as this guy. The problem is you just have no money and you have very few routes to expansion. The reason you're not attacked from all directions is very quickly one direction is totally cut off, if not almost two. So that's my advice. Subdue the starting region, upgrade Howling Citadel, sack or raise Crystal Spire. Occupying it is a viable strat as well. Wipe out Archeon the Ever-Chosen, either conquer or make peace with Norska to the south, then worry about pushing west or even further south down here and saving Kislev from the north, at which point your bonus relations with the Ice Court can mean you can confederate them. Now, you also are probably wondering what to do with politics because he does not have the political competition of Kostaltyn or the Tzarina, in which case you have the ability to support whichever faction you like, Ice Court or Orthodoxy. You want to support the Ice Court, pretty much, period, end of sentence. You want to build them all the way up. The reason is, if you build them all the way up, the odds of them confederating Kostaltyn are considerable, and you have increased 40 relations with them because Tzarina is his daughter, meaning it's much easier for you to confederate her than it is to confederate Kostaltyn. Be aware that you want to keep an eye on both of them. If one's about to die, the chance of you being able to confederate them goes up significantly. In terms of invocations, you're going to be using Ursus a lot because you'll be occupying and building settlements. Outside of that, Wrath of the Bear can become very handy when fighting. Don't worry about getting money from buildings and tariffs, and don't really worry about growth replenishment. You should have enough replenishment since you don't have chaos attrition. The growth is nice, but you'll be fine. He is one of the few lords I do recommend getting early on, building some farmsteads, because you really need to get your capital settlement leveled up to get good units and level it up enough to build garrisons. Early on, though, hallowed woods are great for the replenishment rate and the anti-corruption, plus the additional ambush. All told, get the level 3 walls, build up your capital, and at that point, figure out what the heck's going on in the world and pick your path because it's so random. The 3 runs I did of this, entirely different each time. And that is Boris Ursus. He's a very interesting lord. It's a very difficult start. It feels easier than the other Kislevite factions, though, somehow. So, thank you guys all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this guide. If you have any questions, please leave them below. Check out my other guides if you haven't done so. And if for some reason you've managed to sit and watch through an hour and 24 minutes of this, do leave a like and a subscription. Minimum a like, ideally a subscription, because I'm going to be doing more guides and similar games to this. Thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in another video or guide. Bye for now.